5 sets of wheels, 4 seasons on the C8, 3 dozen tires at least 4, 5, 6 different brake pads, and yeah, still tracking the C8. It's here, it's back in the garage, and you can see set number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the OEM set. So why do I have so many wheels? Why do I have so many tires? We're gonna get into it. And I think I'm gonna structure this like I did the last video, which is basically lessons I learned along the way. I think the one that surprised me the most is being able to set faster times on skinnier tires. So I'm gonna talk about that as well as a whole lot of other stuff like wheels, tires, brakes, and pretty much everything I've learned tracking the C8 as far as those 3 items go. So for about 50% of this car's life and maybe like 90% of me being fast enough to extract a lot out of the car has been running on like 275 or 265 front, 285 rear, which is a lot less than stock, at least for the back. And why is this? Because I was optimizing the car for grid life, and in like the street mod category, you cannot run wider than 285 tires. And so I have like this set and that set over there, which is, 275, 285, and I think 275, 285. So as I'm trying to explain this video, you don't need the widest tires to go fast. However, I will explain why you might want wider tires and why everyone just runs bigger, wider tires. Number one is in high sustained Gs or in high sustained corners, wider tires tend to just give you more grip because of the contact patch shape. This is not rocket science. It's just the wider the tire, pretty much the more lateral grip you're gonna have in sustained Gs, or probably even generally. And then the second thing is putting power down. So being able to put like 500, 700, 800 horsepower down is almost always better with the wider tire. When running the 285s, I think the biggest issue that I found was in sweepers. So take turn 2 at Thunderhill, for example. It's like a 60 to like 80 mile an hour sustained left turn, and by the time I'm getting to the end of it, my tires are getting really hot and squirmy, and then it also kind of affects the next 2-3 turns before I have a chance to give the tire some rest. And so while going through this corner with high slip angle might be faster, it's not necessarily better in the grand scheme of like the first 2 to turn 6. And so yeah, just keep in mind that your tires are going to get hotter faster. And then as far as putting power down, I don't think I really have a lot of issues because mid-engine, so yep. And so as an unintended consequence, I think I learned to like driving on a very oversteery setup and just value entry rotation just a lot more than normal, I guess, which I think is probably also faster. So yep, if you want to learn by force how to be a faster driver, then undersize your rear tires. So I want to be clear, I'm not saying that skinnier tires are faster and wider tires are slower or anything like that. Obviously, they're not. I think what I'm trying to say is it's not as easy or as linear as you might think it is, because your contact patch is scientifically just the load times the pressure of your tires. So if you have less pressure, you have more contact patch. And then if you have for the same amount of pressure, if you press on it more, you have more contact patch. So those are like the only 2 things that really affect your tire contact patch. The shape is affected by the size of the tire. So wider tire, longer shape, skinnier tire, more square shape, I guess. So why are wider tires faster? Well, they have more heat capacity in them. So in the middle of a turn, you're not using so much of the tire's grip. Whatever you're doing, you just have more tire to like absorb the heat. And so it's easier to manage temperatures. And then just having a possibly stiffer sidewall or a more supported sidewall also helps a lot with turning and just responsiveness and stuff like that. Although going too wide can hurt you, as many tests have shown. But I think the most famous test, or like the best test that shows this, is Tire Rack. Tire Rack did a test where they put a 215 on a 9-inch wide wheel, and then they put a 245 on a 7-inch wide wheel, and the 215 beat it. So it just shows that having more tire support is more important than just having a wider tire. And so what I did for my 285 is that I put as big of a, or as wide of a wheel as I could get to support 285. And so my 285 wheel width ended up being between 11 and 11.5. And then my 275 wheel width ended up being 10.5 to 11. And in some instances, it's basically stretched. And then in some other instances, it looks fine. So I'm gonna do something that I wish I see more, which is just tire reviews of tires and track. And this is just my opinion. And I would say I didn't test a lot of these tires in like the most optimal condition. For example, I tested the Bridgestone on skinny widths, so 285 max. I've tested the Vittors on like 275 to like 345. And maybe I wasn't as fast with the RT660s and so on, but I'm just gonna give my opinion anyway. So as everyone does, we all start out on the GOAT of the tires, the Michelin PS4S. I think this is a great street tire if you're not tracking that often. And I think as far as summer tires goes, this is like pretty much the best tire. Maybe not anymore because, time has passed, right? So I think once you get past like an intermediate level, they start to fall, they start to overheat very quickly, especially in a car like this. So you very quickly want to jump up. As far as like the grip goes, I think it's a very good tire to start out with and learn because it doesn't have as much grip as like the 200 treadwear tires that are going to come later. So it can help you either reinforce good habits if you're taking it more systematically, and just teach you how to deal with tires getting hotter as the session goes by. Because as the session goes by, your tires get hotter, you start to understeer more or oversteer more, and PS4S just teaches you how to do stuff like that. I think obviously as far as pace goes, let's say like the baseline is 2 minutes, for example, on like a track like Thunderhill. I would say, 2 minutes, PS4S 2 minutes. So then I got RT660s. How did I get RT660s? I was being cheap, as I always am, and I got them off Craigslist. I think Facebook Marketplace is where people get stuff now. So the guy I got them from had a Camaro. He said that he got them from somebody else who had a time attack car that they ran one session on, and he brought the tires. Great guy. I'm not sure if whatever. They were not one session old tires. They were like maybe like 3 track day old tires. And especially when you're running like time attack, you're heat cycling them very quickly and very hot. And then they're basically going through a lot of cycles. So the tread was not super deep, like yeah. So there was not a lot of tread there, and they were just very heat cycled. I didn't know this. Again, I'm starting out, so I just expected the best. I will say though, it was very clearly noticeable that there is slightly more grip, but there was a lot less control. So take Facebook Marketplace claims with a grain of salt, and don't just buy used tires based on what the seller says. Now, I'm not going to discourage buying used tires at all. You can buy used slicks, just know what you're getting into. And then the other issue that I ran into with the RT660s is an issue everybody runs into with the RT660s. They delaminate. Even the RT660 Plus, which was recently released, also delaminates. It's like a okay tire, but I think for the delamination issues, like there's just so much better tires on the market to be running. Unless you're getting these for free or like heavily discounted, I would not run them. Going back to the baseline, as far as time goes, I would say these are like a 1.5 seconds faster than PS4S, at least, probably 2 if they're like brand new. So the next tire that I tried was the CRS V2. They were very hot, around like I think 21, 22, maybe 23. Everyone wanted them. They were the fastest tire, and I think this is kind of where I started to understand like tire feedback and just communication with the tire. It had stiffer sidewalls than the 2 tires I've already tried, but in retrospect, it has not as stiff of a sidewall as I actually do like. The grip was instant, at least for me. I think instant PBs pretty much every track that I went to. One interesting thing that I know happened with these tires is I noticed the fronts were wearing faster than the rears, which almost never happens. I think that may have been due to a few issues, like just maybe driving, understeering a lot. The brakes were still OEM, and so they had a lot of heat retention, and they were also just undersized, I think, for the car's capacity and what the car can do. So these days, I'm not really sure what the wear rate is. I think if I have skinny tires in the back wears faster, and then if I have skinny tires in the front wears faster. So there's a balance somewhere in there. So as far as the CRS goes with the lap time, I think 2 minutes. If that's your baseline, this would be like 2.5 to 3 seconds faster than than your PS4S, and I think it's going to be about 1 second faster than like the RT660s. I would say I had a hard time being consistently fast in this tire. I think the next tire, which is the RE71RS, which I think is like the second best I've ever run, is still king of the 200 tread weight, I think. I mean, the RE71RZ also just came out, so we'll see how that is. It doesn't look like it's much faster or any faster at all, so we'll see. I would say the big difference with the 71RS is the communication. The sidewalls are very stiff. You can feel this driving to the track. And, you know, I may or may not have gotten bucket seats at this time too, but I just think the stiff sidewalls, especially compared to other 200 treader tires like the Vitors and all that, the stiff sidewalls really give you a lot of communication, and they don't need a lot of pressure to get there. And then they're also fast. So great tire, honestly. Can't really say much about this. Obviously, with faster 200 tread weight tires, you are getting peak grip first 2 laps, and then it starts to fall off after that. There's a lot of tests on like the times. I'm just giving you my experience. I think one of the issues that tends to happen with these tires is they don't make like 345s, for example, but like they don't need to, because the 285 is as big as the OEM 305. I measured it, and then the 285 Vitor P1s are a lot skinnier than the 285 Bridgestone. So I'm pretty sure like Bridgestone is like underselling their width here, probably just to help me out, I guess. So the P1s, also a great tire, to be honest. They last very long. They don't heat cycle out as much as the like 200. They don't heat cycle out as much as like the CRS and the RE71RS goes. I don't think they're as fast as the RE71RS is. In fact, I can like stake my reputation on this. They're definitely not as fast as the RE71RS is. They're not much slower though. So, you know, maybe like 0.2, 0.3, 0.5 seconds off, depending on what's going on. And they can even be even a lot of the times. But as I already explained in the previous section, you know, tread widths differ between brands. So 285 here, 285, they're very different. So like, that's another thing that contributes to like the time, right? All right, speaking of time, I think the RE71RSs are solid 3 seconds, maybe 3.5 if you're like get them like day 0 faster than like PS4Ss. And the Vitors are like 3 to 3.2 faster than the PS4Ss. Now getting to the best tire that I've tried so far, the Supercar 3Rs. I think the first session with the Supercar 3Rs is like forever etched in my brain, because it wasn't like a good, like I've read a lot about the tire, how it takes a long time to warm up and all that. But I think like for me, lap 4 was when it started to get good / fast. And then I just kept trying to go faster, and it kept taking it. And I kept trying to go fast, and it kept taking it. And then there was just basically this moment of just like bliss where it would tell you exactly what it's going to do in the middle of the corner. So you know exactly how much speed you can carry and stuff like that. Great tire. I ran out of skill that day, and you know, shit happened, but great tire still. The problem with this tire is it wears so fucking fast, so fucking fast. I think I maybe did probably 3 track days, I think, yeah. And then it also heat cycles really quickly too. So the pace that I had first day and maybe the second time was not there the third time I tried it. So it's definitely like I want to go fast. And I think if you're gonna get this tire, you should definitely just, you don't want to get this tire and then waste it, you know, get this tire and send it. All right, so let's talk about wheel widths and just wheel sizes and mistakes that I made. I've run stuff from 8.5 with 245s, which OEM, and then all the way to like 12s on the back with 345s. Again, I say 345s in quote because the Vitor 345s and the Supercar 3R 325s are like the same exact width. But they both take 12 inches, well, whatever. I think the combo that I'm settling on is 18-19. So I would say the optimal tire for the C8s for track is 18 by 10.5 on the front and 19 by 12 on the back. I had 1818s, and you know, it sounds tempting, especially with the tire savings claims. 1818s, I think, make your car too low, especially if it's high camber and you've already lowered it. And it's also not a lot of choices when it comes to matching up the tires, because most 18-inch tires come in 35, but you need a 18-30 aspect ratio in the front and a 35 aspect ratio in the back, or some like odd combination like that to really like get your traction control working in like the best optimal setting. So Tire Reviews did this wheel weight test where they tested a 52-pound wheel, 38-pound wheel, 20-pound wheel. So forged, something in the middle, I think a replica, and then a really heavy one. And the difference in lap times for all of them is just surprisingly not as worth it as you would think. So the heaviest wheel, which is 52 pounds, had 6.07 seconds acceleration time. The 38-pound wheel had 5.93, and then the 20-pound wheel had 5.76. Over a lap, this adds up. So when let's say the baseline is the, forged 20-pound wheel, which was 139.13. The almost 40-pound wheel got 139.92, and then the 52-pound wheel got 140.74. So we're talking about a difference of like 0.8 for twice the weight. So that means when you're buying your, let's say you're buying a wheel and you're trying to decide between forged, which is like 20 pounds, and flow formed, which is like 22, 23 pounds. Those 3 pounds are getting you maybe like 0.1 seconds on the track. So it's not as important as it seems to get a lighter tire, and lighter tires can damage easier just because they don't have as much structure. So yeah, don't worry so much about this. I mean, I think my personal recommendation is just buy flow formed wheels. They worked well for me. They are heavier, yes, but it doesn't make that much of a difference with the amount of money you're paying for it. So I think this is like a rare instance where saving money may be worth it. Decide. So I've owned a bunch of wheel brands. I think my recommendation is just buy Apex wheels. I have BC Forged wheels, for example, and the hole for the lugs are too tight. And when I'm taking the wheel on and off, they always rub the lug nuts or the studs or whatever they call them. And my OEM studs failed. So my OEM studs failed. And by failed, I mean like, I think they got flat at some point, and it went on fine, but it did not back out normally. And so I thought I cross-threaded it, but like it's so hard to cross-thread these like M14 studs. So yep, watch out for that. Now I very carefully put it in, and I honestly just don't like the wheel because of that. So yeah, just buy Apex. They know what they're doing. They've engineered stuff, they support a Californian company too. All right, so a quick section on brakes. I've talked about brakes at length before. I would say the two things I want to highlight are the car brakes very well. There's only one other person who has driven my car ever, and the best thing he had to say about it was, the car stops very well. So well, in fact, that he's looking for how to stop better in his own car. You know who you are. So you get a lot of this performance at OEM. Basically, like, getting AP brakes is not necessarily to make your car stop better, although it definitely does contribute somewhat. It's mostly because the brakes get very hot and you go through your pads very quickly. So yeah, I mean, as a result of like trying to manage the heat and all that, I've gone through a lot of pads. So I'm just gonna give you like a quick rundown of all the pads that I've gone through. OEM eventually faded. Carbotech XP8, XP10 combo, great intro, but it wore very quickly as I started getting faster. Like 1-2 track days quick. XP12, weirdly less bites than the XP10, so I didn't really like that. And they also wore really quickly. And then the XP20, more bites, more brake. It still faded on the stock brakes. And so I went to the Cobalt XR1s, which I don't think I had much of a problem with. I was using like the titanium backing plate at this point and, trying all I could to cool the brakes. But I think these are good. And then I went to the GP40 by Girodisc. And I think at this point, I also have floating discs as well. So with the GP40, I didn't like this because it was more of an endurance pad, like a real endurance pad where like you don't really get a lot of bites, and it's meant to work at more stable temperatures, So yep, I like that kind of bite. I like my face to be ripped off when I'm braking. Then I went to the Ferrodo DS 3.12s, which are like the stock AP Racing kits, and again, great pad, wonderful introduction to like, you know, I think the AP rigs. I think like it's very clear why they paired the both of them together. It has good longevity, and yep, can't really say too much bad about it. Like at the end of the day, it is still a endurance pad, and so it's going to last you longer, and the bite is not as strong as it possibly could be. And so I went seeking the strongest possible bite, which for me was the Paget RST ones. Great pad, stops on a dime, gave me exactly what I wanted, eats rotors, and the pad also wears faster. Switching from the Paget to the Ferodos introduced like judder, so you know, maybe the compounds were incompatible or something, but something was going wrong. Maybe it was the rotor that was shot. So I changed rotors and it seemed to be fine. Things that I tried that didn't really work, titanium shims and floating rotors on the OEM brake system. They worked initially, and then again, you get faster, or some tracks just demand more out of your brakes than others. So I think if I were going to do this again, just skip all these pain and lesson and money and just save your money for the AP racing. At least the front, eventually the rear, because you are going to need both. But yeah, cheap is expensive. So I'll say that your alignment is relative to how aggressive you want to have the car be on track and how aggressive you want to run through your tires. So if you're doing a lot of street driving, don't have an aggressive setup. If you're doing a lot of track driving, have a more aggressive setup. My advice is keep your toe at 0, because my toe specifically, so I think I towed out for the front to give me more grip there, and I towed in for the back. Do that, 0 toe please, because I wore the inside rib or the inside shoulder of every single tire that I did while I had non-zero toe. I don't think it's worth it from like a speed, like the rate at which you go through tires is just not worth it. Camber, I think it's 3.2 on the front, 2.5, 2.7 in the back or something like that. To be honest, it doesn't really, it obviously matters, but like, you know, I'm not like obsessing over like the camber points, because it's not really easily changeable and it costs a lot of money to change. You can find grip in other ways once you're like at like 2 point something. It has double wishbone, and like your camber is probably fine at this level is what I'm trying to say. I will say though, I did have 285 tires, and you can generally tell by the wear pattern. I'm looking back there because you can generally tell by the wear pattern if you need more or less camber. So I think that should actually just be your gauge, you know. Are you wearing the outside? So I will list a whole bunch of things that affect your lap time, apart from not sending it or not sending it. And for a vast majority of people, this does not matter, and it shouldn't matter. Like, you know, just go have fun. But for people who care, your compound, I already talked about that. The sidewall stiffness, construction, either how your car reacts to the tires or you feel the tires more or less. The temperature, both of the tires, of the outside, everywhere. Pressure, aero load, your camber, your inputs, so, you know, send in it, I guess. How many heat cycles your tire has, the track surface temperature, the track surface itself. So, you know, like Button Willow is a very abrasive surface and stuff like that. The ambient temperature and your session length, or rather like when in the session that you're setting your lap time. So a lot of things affect your lap times. So despite what the title might be, I'm not trying to say that, you know, my heydays of going fast were on skinny tires. I cannot wait to run thicker, bigger, wider tires because, you know, I also like going faster. However, I will say that a lot of people care too much about their tire width. You know, I have people telling me constantly that like, how can I run skinny tires? Or like, how will I not run the widest tires I could possibly run? You know, like how? And I was just like, just do it. You know, like it's not that big of a deal. There's just so many things that affect your pace. I mean, if you're a pro, do whatever you want. You're probably not watching this video anyway. If you're going to track days, you're competitive, you know, you're doing time attack, whatever it might be, you know, it's good knowledge to have at the end of the day. I would say things that you want to optimize for are the tire compound, your alignment, your wheel width / support of the tires, and just being a better driver. You can never be good enough, I guess. So the C8 works with a whole lot of tires, 275, 285, as I have proven. I think literally all the laps in my channel from like the last 2 years have been set on 285 rear tires. So yeah, there's no right answer to like the best tires you run. However, given all that I know now, if I were to pick a tire to run in future, I think I would pick a 285 front and 325 rear. So go measure what the tread width is of like the 345 Vitors. That's kind of the size that you want to run in the back. The 285s on the front at 18, I mean, I would say you probably want to run like a maybe 30 ratio tire, ideally not a 35, but I mean 35 also works. You're just gonna like rub something in there. So yeah. So to leave an open question for you guys, what tire setup are you running on whatever car you have, and what would you change about it if you could? The next episode is going to be about aero, basically a lot of the aero parts that I've made myself, or I've added or bought to like make the car faster aero wise. So yep, bye.